So I'm going to dwell, actually, if you think carefully about the topic and the title of this session, carbon dioxide removal, policy considerations for responsible deployment on land and in the ocean. So I want to actually dwell on what do we mean by responsibility in the context of carbon dioxide removal. And I want to basically give you three thought pieces, and they are as follows. First of all, number one, the level of public support and timing thereof for carbon dioxide removal. And it's based on the issues with the scale-up, the inertia of scale-up, and also the inertia that we all know that we're seeing regarding our progress on emissions reduction. So that's issue one. Issue two are basically the level of policies, incentives, and the measures to prevent increasing emissions or just continuing emissions, but whilst also encouraging marine carbon dioxide removal and other forms of carbon dioxide removal as well. And the last one, which is actually, I think, the really thorny one, which is the wider context of climate finance and the needs of people today. So I want to sort of just give a few minutes unpacking those 3 points. So the first one, level of public support and timing. We have limited financial resources at any moment in time. Governments know this, as do we all, just about how much you can invest and how much you can borrow and what all that does. And we've got two big levers that are currently being considered in terms of our action on tackling climate change. The first is clearly emissions reduction, and the second is the inevitable need to have significant carbon dioxide removal. And where are we today with carbon dioxide removal? If we just think about the things that Jill in particular has spoken about, the world of the ocean. So 70% of the world's surface is covered in the ocean. Where are we in terms of technology understanding of the different approaches for ocean-based carbon dioxide removal? And we're not where we need to be. We're not where we need to be to make informed decisions regarding which of these particular approaches are appropriate, which ones are going to really have a big impact. We need to put more money into research and development before we even go really hard at deployment. But we've got this really big problem, is that the longer that we leave it, including deployment, there's just a scale up of industry, no matter how much you're going to throw money on this. This is the software business, where you can have incredible rates of increase in terms of the commercial capability, where all you're doing is selling information which goes through wires. It's incredibly quick to be able to grow really big businesses like Google, Facebook, etc. When you're dealing with hard facts of hard machinery, or even just natural systems that take a while to grow, we've got an inertia in the system which we need to account for. So we need to do more research and development. And then we're going to need to provide finance for that and finance for and support of the deployment and the scale up of this. But it's not just about carbon dioxide removal. We need to be applying the same level of support, arguably even more, for emissions reduction. We've got to stop the problems getting worse. So what are we doing regarding helping developing countries not just go and rely on the ways that the global north did, which is the fossil fuel way of doing things, but actually go and transition away and enjoy a different growth curve than the ones that we have experienced in the global north. So we've got to make sure that the resources that we have, which are finite, and we somehow strike the balance between the allocation, between emissions reduction and the growth in our carbon dioxide removal business. But it's not just money. When I mentioned public support, it wasn't just public finance support, there are other aspects too. It's part of, as Louise says, it's part of developing a responsible pathway and inclusion of citizens and local communities in whatever action it is, whether it's emissions reduction or, importantly in this context, whether it's to do with carbon dioxide removal opportunities. So we need to make sure that we run as fast as the public and local communities will allow. So we all know that when you build a business, the cash is king. You've got to manage your business so that if you grow too quickly, you can run out of cash. But if you don't grow quickly enough, the investors get upset, and therefore you get fired as a CEO. I mean, I've done it myself, and unfortunately, I was able to navigate that pathway in a successful way. You could say, yes, it's all about judgment. I think judgment and luck come into it as well in terms of the dynamics of the market. We've just heard about the crying for more demand in the ocean-based carbon dioxide removal space. That scares me, where you're having lots and lots of money coming in into the space from investors. But if the demand isn't there, this is going to be quite dangerous as an industry. So we've got to make sure that we try and get the financial timescales and how quickly demand grows. But conversely, we also need to make sure in some of these more sensitive areas that we don't run so fast and we don't run ahead of the local community's appetite for this. Public engagement takes time. Public engagement requires a conversation and it requires earning trust. Trust isn't earned overnight. And therein is I'm just laying out the facts that we need to be very careful about how quickly we grow certain approaches, and we're just sensitive to those sorts of issues. I'm not giving you any answers that you might notice. I'm just saying these are some of the issues that I'm aware of that we need to somehow navigate. So that was basically number one. So number two, the level of policies and incentives. Well, where are we with, and especially in this COP? We want to encourage carbon dioxide removal, but also encourage emissions reduction. Are we going to go as hard as penalties for exceeding targets, but whilst we're also building up credits and things like this, we're hoping to see rather more progress in the area of Article 6 and how that all works. Some don't like the language of the instrument in terms of carbon credits. Many of the people that I talk about, especially in the academic community, interestingly, none of them really do not like it. But I'm more of a pragmatist. We need to find a solution to this sort of conundrum, as a minimum, in order to prevent continuing emissions, whilst also having sort of scale up of carbon dioxide removal. And my argument is as follows. We know there are going to be emissions that will continue forever. There are certain activities that we're not going to be able to prevent emissions from. How are we going to feed 8 billion people and just have zero emissions from agriculture? It's not going to happen. So as an absolute minimum, we're going to need to have carbon dioxide removal to compensate, cater for the emissions that will inevitably be continuing. And then rather than having a hard stop, which clearly, in my view, is sliding scale, therefore we're going to continue that to be a net zero, a net negative economy rather than just net zero. That's where we've got to go to. And then number three, the wider context of climate finance and the needs of people today. The insidious nature of climate change is that there is a separation of the timescales between the action that is needed and when the benefits are going to be really, really felt. I know that we're seeing climate disasters right now, but the biggest disasters are yet to come by a long way. And this separation of the timescales between when we need to act and who's really going to benefit is a real challenge for us all, and politicians especially, because the beneficiaries in large part are going to be those in the future. And looking at the needs of the people today are absolutely critical. So don't know whether you picked up, but let's just look and listen to what Keir Starmer said today here in Baku. He was questioned by the BBC's Alex Forsyth just this afternoon, and he said he won't dictate how people live their lives. But it's clear that reaching the ambitious Clean Power 2030 mission is vital. And I think that's really sanguine, that we need to think about how we work with society today, whilst also building an economy for the future that actually looks at the needs of future generations, not just our children, but our children's children and so on. So I think this is a really important issue. Clearly it's an emergency, clearly we need to move as fast as we can, but if we move too quickly, we might lose it all together in terms of the appetite of the world. So that's the issue, that's the navigation challenge that we have ahead of us, but there is clearly a significant role for carbon dioxide removal. And on that, I thought we would then close and leave the room for questions.